What's going on, everybody? I'm Trevor with Maker Experiment, and today I'm going to talk about the 10 things you should consider when buying a laser. Now, if you like what you see during the video, click the like button, hit subscribe, turn the post notifications on so you know when a new video comes out, and without further ado, let's get into it. Number 1, your budget. You want to figure out how much you want to spend on a laser. So the typical ranges that I see are $0 to $5,000, $5,000 to $10,000, $10,000 to $20,000, and then above $20,000. So most people that when they're getting started are going to be in that $0 to $5,000 range. Now there are a lot of options inside of that range. Some machines come with support and some don't. Now in the $0 to $5,000 range, you're looking at the lasers off of eBay, from Amazon, some entry-level lasers that are imported and supported by companies inside of the United States, but it's rare that you're going to be in that $5,000 range. Most often they go into the $5,000 to $10,000 range, usually in the $6,000 price point. Now the companies that are going to be in that range from about $5,000 to $10,000 are probably going to be the full spectrum, Boss Laser, Glowforge. Entry-level Epilogues can be in that range. Maybe some Trotex, but unlikely, and Universal. And then from the $10,000 to $20,000 range is where you're looking into that low-level production, entry-level production type of machinery, and some machines that are going to be production level. And then above $20,000 is going to be if you're in full production and you need that reliability. Those are usually the ranges that you're going to be looking at. Number 2. CO2 versus fiber. So these are just the laser source types. CO2 is the most common when you're getting started because it can do the most amount of materials as far as variation. So CO2, you can do more like cork and leather and glass and acrylic and wood. And fiber is going to be more focused on engraving and cutting metals. So if you want to do metal work, I would look at the fiber lasers. If you're working with pretty much anything else, wood, glass. If you want to engrave tumblers, you can use CO2. So those are kind of the reasons you'd go for each one, mostly based on materials. On a side note to that, the fiber lasers are going to be more expensive. Usually, I would say sometimes twice as expensive. It just depends. Number 3, the type of laser tube. Now, a lot of people don't know that there's different types, as well as not really sure what the differences are among them. I'm not going to go into the differences in depth, but there are the glass tube lasers, the metal RF tubes, and then there's also ceramic. Ceramic is mostly going to be the Trotec line of lasers. Metal is going to be more of the Universal and Epilogue. There are other companies that do them, but in my scenario, when I was looking, those were pretty much the two main ones. And then glass tube is pretty much all imported ones and all entry-level lasers. So Glowforge, Full Spectrum, Boss Laser, Thunder Laser, right out of the box, they all come with a glass tube. Some of those companies may be able to upgrade to a metal tube, but glass tube is usually the typical. Now, glass is going to be the cheapest option, and it also requires a water cooling loop. So you will have an extra water pump to plug in, and you'll have to have distilled water that will run through the tube and cool it down as it's operational. So keep the tube type in mind when you're going through this. So the glass tube, from all my research and personal experience, is less efficient than the metal tube. That's not necessarily always the case. I know some people have reported otherwise, but in my experience, the glass tube lasers typically have a shorter lifespan. They aren't quite as efficient as putting out the power, and the metal tube is going to be more efficient, but much more expensive. So a glass tube laser might be, $400 to $500 for a 40-watt tube. A metal tube would be in the $1,200 to $1,300 range. So keep that in mind from a replacement cost standpoint. The tubes are a consumable product that has to be replaced, so eventually you will have to buy one. Number 4, the wattage. Most people don't know what wattage to use either. The wattage is going to be the power output, basically, of the laser source. What I would say is a good range is in the 40 to 80 watt range if you want to cut and engrave. If you only want to engrave, you can get a 4 to 5 watt one, attach it to a CNC machine, and you're fine. The speed is not quite there if you're going to attach a laser to another piece of machinery. The speed on a dedicated laser is going to be much faster. Now, among the lasers, if you're going below 40 watts, you can cut a lot of things, just not up to certain thicknesses. So I had a 40 watt laser, and I could cut up to 1/4 of an inch material. When I had a glass tube one, I had trouble cutting through it in one pass. When I had a metal RF tube one, it cut through with one pass, no problem. And this is just my experience. If you're mostly going to be cutting materials, you might want to look in the higher ranges, so 75 watt and up. It just depends, but a good balance if you want to engrave and you want to cut things is going to be in that 40 watt to 80 watt range, because as you get higher and higher in the wattages, the engraving quality might degrade just because of the change in power and the change in lenses and other things. Number 5, what do you want to make? If you want to make everything out of wood and paper, acrylic and cork or whatever, you're probably going to want a CO2 laser. And if you only want to do tumblers, this is where it gets kind of tricky because some lasers don't have the rotary attachment option. So if you want to engrave tumblers, a laser like the Boss or Full Spectrum, and then of course like the Universals and Epilogues, will all have the rotary option. Some of the ones that don't have that might be the ones from eBay, Amazon, and I think Glowforge doesn't have that rotary attachment. So if you want to do tumblers and that's something you want to focus on, or at least have the option to do, make sure your machine has that ability. If you want to work with metals, consider the fiber laser because that's mostly designed to work with metals. So it all comes down to what you want to focus on, what you want to make, material wise. So every company should have a spec sheet saying what materials it works with. So check that out when you're researching these and find out what materials they work with. But number 1, do not cut anything hazardous. So don't use PVC, don't use carbon fiber. It puts out hazardous fumes that can cause health issues. So make sure you do your homework if you're using a new material that is not on the spec sheet of the laser manuals, because it may be hazardous to actually cut it. And there's even magnetic materials that are laserable and ones that are not. So make sure you're checking that out and using ones that are approved for laser use. The other thing is certain materials put off fumes and gases that can actually cause damage to your lenses and mirrors. So always do your homework on the materials. If you have good customer support, you can call them, ask about a material, and they'll even test it for you and tell you if it's okay to use. And that brings me to number 6, your customer service and support. Now, I've had variations of this depending on the laser company I've been with. The first one I had, I didn't have very good customer support. The one I have now, I have great customer support. So it all depends, and it definitely depends on the machine itself. If you are getting a machine from Amazon or eBay and they're really cheap and you get a big machine for the money, chances are you don't have any support and the manual is not going to be the easiest to get through. That being said, typically there's forums and groups out there that come together and they help each other out, and you can search the forums for answers to your questions. So there's usually community support around them anyway. But if you want to be able to call the company directly and get good service, that's going to be something you want to consider. So some companies don't have any customer service. Some have okay customer service, and then some have excellent customer service. But before you do anything, before you make a decision on the laser you want to go with, give the company a call, see if they'll answer questions, see if they'll answer technical questions. That'll give you a good indication as to whether they will be good for customer service or not. Because if they blow you off as a potential customer, they might blow you off as an actual customer too. Number 7, parts and warranty. So most lasers come with a 1-year warranty right out of the gates. Ones from Amazon and eBay, again, might not do that. Most other ones, though, that are imported and supported are typically with a 1-year warranty. Some might be different. As far as parts go, most of them are going to be readily available if you're buying the machine new. If you're buying a used machine, you may want to call the company, see how long the parts are going to be available for, or at least if they're going to be available for the next 5 to 10 years. These lasers can last decades, depending on the build quality and the part availability. So buying a used machine, you might not want to buy a 10-year-old machine because they might not make the parts anymore, but call the customer service and technical support of the manufacturer. Find out if they still make parts, how long they might be making parts for, and use that to help make your decision. Because if you buy a used machine and you can't get any parts, it just becomes a paperweight. So make sure you're doing your homework and your research and not buying something that you can't get the parts for anymore. As far as warranties go, most companies, when you get it and you replace a part, the new part doesn't necessarily get a new warranty. There are companies that do. So I know mine, if I replace a part, that part comes with a new warranty. Now, there are factors that can void your warranty. If you're in too hot of an environment, if you're not running it at the right, conditions. So some you have to limit to 90-degree ambient temperature so that it's not going to overheat or cause any problems. If you do, it can void your warranty. So be careful and make sure that you're abiding by all of the manufacturer details and guidelines, because it's just like any other company, they might do their best to try to get out of a warranty situation. There are companies that might not care at all and will warranty anything that goes out regardless of how you're running it, but that's not always the case. So just read through the guidelines of the manual and the warranty stipulations and make sure you're going with them as you're supposed to. Number 8, your space and your power. From a space standpoint, make sure you can put it wherever you want it to be. So in my case, my machine is too big to fit through my house doorway. It's just too big. It's too wide. It doesn't come apart. It's the one I have is the whole chassis is one piece to make it more solid. So there are limitations of what you can fit into your home or your studio or whatever else, that you need to make sure that you can fit it through your doorways and into the spot you want to be. Just because you can fit it through the front door doesn't mean that you can navigate the hallway. So make sure you measure and go through all that before you purchase a machine, because it would be really crappy if you bought it, get it here, and then you can't get it in the spot you want. Also, make sure that you have room for any other things that are needed. Pretty much every laser is going to need an air assist, which is going to be a small compressor, an exhaust fan, which is usually like a dust collector type fan. And then if you have a glass tube laser, you will need a water cooling chiller or water pump to circulate the water through it. And that will be an extra thing taking load on the circuit. So it's recommended that you have the laser on its own dedicated circuit and all of the accessories on a different circuit. If you don't, it can have too much power and draw too many amps, and it can trip the breaker, and it can do that mid-job. And you don't want that to happen. I've had it happen. It is awful. Don't do what I did. Another thing with power, 110 and 220. So if you are below 60 watt lasers or at a 60 watt laser, most of them will run off of 110. If you go to 75 watt and up, most of them will require 220. So if you need more power, make sure you have the necessary outlet to do so. Most of the electrical requirements will be in the user manual, or you can call the company and find out what it uses. Make sure that you have the outlet available for that. And even if you're inside in a house, most people don't have 220 in the house other than maybe like a dryer or a stove. So just make sure that you are getting something that you can actually plug in. Along with that part and the space you're working in, make sure that you can vent the laser fumes either outdoors or into a special filtration system that laser companies make. Whatever you do, do not vent into something that can cause a fire. So don't vent into a dust collector system that has bags or filters that is just like a woodworking type of dust collection, because it can catch all of that on fire and you aren't going to want that. Just make sure you have a way to vent it. Even if it's putting the tube out the window, you can do that too. And they won't come with most of that stuff. You might have to buy the ducting and everything from like Home Depot or Lowe's or whatever. Number 9, software and accessories. From a design standpoint, there's CorelDRAW, Adobe Illustrator, there's going to be Affinity, Inkscape. There's a lot of different softwares. The important part is that it's a vector software. So lasers will run off of vector paths to control everything. So you're going to need a vector software. Most of them bundle it with CorelDRAW for some reason, but you can use any of them. The other thing with software is every laser is going to either have a print driver or a dedicated program to send to the laser. So you'll design in one of these programs, you'll then print it, and it will send it to the laser, either print driver or that laser software. And then you're going to have to put in your settings for the laser itself and then output it to the laser from that software. No matter what you do, you're going to have to learn either a print driver or another piece of software. Just know that going into it. And most companies will have that software available for download before you ever buy the machine. So you can go check out the software, see if you like it or not, see if you can navigate it, see how quirky it is, and even look up reviews and see what people think. From an accessory standpoint, there's a few accessories that you might want to look into. The first one would be the rotary attachment. So the rotary attachment is going to be if you want to do tumblers or anything cylindrical like flashlights or rolling pins. There's all kinds of things you can do with it. Some lasers support them, some lasers do not. Make sure you do the homework there. If you need a rotary attachment, that automatically eliminates some of your choices of lasers because they just don't support them and they don't have them for the machine. Next is a vector table. A vector table is basically a platform that you set materials on, and it has openings on it in the bottom. So when the laser beam goes through, it goes through these gaps and goes into the bottom of that housing for the vector table. And it allows you to cut through things while leaving minimal marking on the back of the material. So if you're going to be cutting a lot of things, you're going to need a vector cutting table. Most packages, if you go to like a trade show or something, they'll usually include this in the price. But if you just call the company and you try to work with them, sometimes they'll make you a deal and throw it in with the machine anyway. Number 3 on this list for accessories is going to be the lenses. So typically it comes with a stock lens of 2 inches, depending on the machine. Some fiber lasers and ones that have the camera systems might come with a 3-inch lens. So they are from 1.5 typically, all the way to 4 inches. 4 inches is going to be more focused on cutting and cutting thicker stuff. 1.5 is going to be more focused on fine detailed engraving. The next one is going to be an air compressor. You're going to need this anyway. The air compressor is going to be for the air assist in the laser. All the ones I've had have had this. So the air assist basically keeps a steady stream of air on the actual focal point of where the laser is hitting to reduce flame up so that nothing catches on fire. Don't walk away from your laser when you're running it. You can be in the same room, but don't like turn it on and then go get Starbucks. Just don't, because anything can happen. It can cause a fire. You could not be here and then you come back to a burnt house. Number 5 on the list of accessories is going to be the exhaust fan. You are going to need this, and the rating of what you will need will depend on your machine. Now, the small ones that are like tabletop size, you can get away with a pretty small exhaust fan. Once you get up to like a 60 watt, bigger 24 by 36 inch machine, you might need like a 1.5 or 2 horsepower exhaust fan to get that all out with at least a CFM of probably like 650. Just make sure that you have one, that it's rated for the machine. If you're not sure what to look for, you can contact the laser manufacturer and they will give you some recommendations as far as which ones they might use. And the 6th one on the accessories list is the water chiller. So this is only going to be necessary if you have the water-cooled glass tube type of laser. If you have a metal RF tube, they are air-cooled. They don't need that part of the system, so it's one less thing to plug in. And number 10, consider buying used. So I did this for the first 2 lasers that I owned, and it turned out really well for me. I won't say that's always the case. I think I got pretty lucky. The first one, I bought a laser worth about $6,000 if you bought it new, and I bought it for about $1,000 because the person just wanted it gone, didn't really know what they were doing, and just got tired of it. So I bought it, found out what I liked and didn't like about using it. Ultimately, I switched because I just didn't enjoy that one. And for $900, I mean, I'm not totally surprised. The next one, I bought a used Epilogue off of Craigslist, and that one I bought with a dead tube. And I bought it for about $5,000 and replaced the tube, and it was, I think, maybe $6,300 after I replaced it. And the machine, if I bought it new, was about $20,000. So you can save a significant amount of money by buying a used machine. But if you don't like looking at Craigslist or like machinery auctions, you can also contact the manufacturers. Sometimes they will have refurbished machines that they buy back from customers. They'll refurbish them and sell them back to you, and that can save you some money, and they're usually basically brand new looking. They'll clean them up, they'll replace any component that has to be replaced, and if the company's a good one, they'll tack on a warranty with it. So when I bought my latest one, I bought it pre-owned from Epilogue, and they gave me a brand new warranty with everything, so if anything were to go out, it's covered. But the good thing on this is it still saved me, thousands of dollars. So keep that in mind if you want to go with a Universal or a Boss laser or whatever. Call the manufacturer, see if they have pre-owned options, and that could save you a lot of money and actually get you from one type of tiered machine to a lower price point. So if you wanted, say, a machine that's in the $10,000 to $20,000 range, that's a production level machine, but you don't have the money, sometimes buying pre-owned can bring it down into that $5,000 to $10,000 range and make it a little bit more manageable. If you're going to buy used, make sure you ask a series of questions to the manufacturer about what to look for. If they're really good at customer service, they will tell you what to look for in a used machine regardless of if you're buying it from them. So some things to look for might be the tube, because it's a consumable, the lens, the mirrors, what type of accessories it might come with, how long it has been ran, if they have an idea of that, when it was manufactured, and get the serial number. And the reason I tell you that is, it's the world as we know it, and people steal things. So getting the serial number, call the manufacturer, ask them to review the serial number, and they can see if somebody has reported it stolen or anything like that, and they'll check it out for you, and then you can have the peace of mind knowing that you're not buying a stolen machine. Also, if you're buying used, ask what parts they've replaced, see what has changed on it. Sometimes sellers will get rid of everything with it, so the computer, all the components, even materials sometimes. And that does it for my 10 things you should consider when buying a laser. I know it's a lot of information and it's a really long video, but if you have any questions about this, feel free to reach out to me. I'll put my info in the description. And then if you like what you saw, please leave a thumbs up. Subscribe if you want to. I'm not going to force you to. And I am going to try to put out more content about lasers and design and projects, and try to answer any questions you guys might have about lasers and do my best to give you the most accurate information possible. You can also follow me on my Instagram at Maker Experiment, where I share project updates and information. I also do polls and questions about laser stuff, and I also answer all messages and emails as I get to them to make sure that I'm communicating with you guys and helping as much as I can. So if you like what you saw and you feel like subscribing, go ahead. If you want to turn on the post notifications so you know when I put a new video out, that would be awesome. Other than that, I'll see you next time.